Hello, bruvs. We're back with The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. All right, bruvs. We're back with, as I stated, Donna Tartt's The Little Friend. The Little Friend, buddy. We're in chapter 6. Going to start it here in a second when I get this thing updated. All right, let's just go to this. No, that ain't the right one. What's going on? We done? I think we on. All right, here we go. The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. Chapter 6. We start at page 358. Oh, what happened? Is the light off? No, light's on. All right, let's do this. Why is it dark? All right. Though he felt guilty for it, Danny was enjoying his grandmother's stay in the hospital. Hi, buddy. How are you? Danny was enjoying his grandmother's stay in the hospital. Things were easier without her at home, stirring up Farish all the time. And though Farish was doing a lot of drugs with gum away, there was nothing to stop him from sitting in front of the television. What's up, Robs? There was nothing to stop him from sitting in front of the television with the razor and the mirror all night long. He wasn't so likely to blow up at his brothers without the additional strain of gathering 3 times a day for Gum's large fried meals in the kitchen. The Bible, yeah, definitely the Bible, buddy. Danny was doing a lot of drugs himself, but that was all right. He was going to stop soon, but he just hadn't got to that point. And the drugs gave him enough energy to clean the whole trailer. Barefoot, sweating, stripped to his jeans, he washed windows and walls and floors. He threw out all the rancid grease and bacon fat that Gum secreted around the kitchen and smelly old coffee cans. He scrubbed down the bathroom and polished the linoleum until it shone and bleached all of their underwear and T-shirts until they were white again. All right, Brobs. Their grandmother had never got used to the washing machine Farish had bought her. She was bad about washing the white clothes with colors, so they got gray looking. Cleaning made Danny feel good, in control. The trailer was trim and shipshape, like the galley of a boat. Even Farish commented on how neat things were looking, though Danny knew better than to touch any of Farish's projects. The partially assembled machinery, the broken lawnmowers and carburetors, and table lamps, it was possible to clean up around them, and getting rid of all the needless mess helped a lot. Twice a day, he drove the trash to the garbage dump. After heating alphabet soup or frying bacon and eggs for Curtis, he washed the dishes and dried them immediately instead of letting them sit. He'd even figured out how to stack everything in the cabinet so it didn't take up as much room. At night, he sat up with Farish. This was another good thing about speed. It doubled your day. There was time to work, time to talk, time to think, and there was a lot to think about. The recent attacks on the mission on Gum had marshaled Farish's attention to a single point. In the old days, before his head injury, Farish had a knack for reasoning out certain kinds of practical and logistical problems, and some of this quiet old calculating shrewdness was in the cock of his head as he and Danny stood together on the abandoned overpass, checking out the crime scene. The Cobra's decorated dynamite box, empty, a child's red wagon, and a bunch of little footprints running back and forth in the cement dust. Yeah, this Bible stuff is great. If it was her that done this, said Farish, I'm on the kill, the little bitch. He was silent, hands on hips, staring down at the cement dust. What are you thinking, Danny said. I'm thinking, how did a kid move this heavy box with the wagon, not down the stairs at the mission? Farish chewed on his lower lip. Also, if she stole the snake, why knock on her and show her face? Danny shrugged. Kids, he said. He lit a cigarette, taking the smoke up through his nose, and snapped the big Zippo lighter shut. They're dumb. Whoever done this wasn't dumb. To pull this off took some kind of balls and timing. Or luck. Whatever, said Farish. His arms were crossed across his chest, military looking in the brown coverall, and all of a sudden he was staring at the side of Danny's face in a way that Danny didn't like. You wouldn't do anything to hurt Gum, would you? He said. Danny blinked. No. He was almost too shocked to speak. Jesus. She's old. I know it, said Danny, tossing his long hair rather aggressively out of his face. I'm just trying to think who else knew that it was her, not you, driving the Trans Am that day. Why? Said Danny after a short, stunned pause. The glare off the highway was shining up in his eyes, and it increased his confusion. What difference does it make? All she said was she didn't like to climb up in the truck. I told you that. Ask her yourself. Or me. What? Or me, said Farish. She was breathing audibly in moist little huffs. You wouldn't do anything to hurt me, would you? No, said Danny after a long, tense pause, his voice as flat as he could make it. What he felt like saying but was afraid to was, fuck you. He spent fully as much time on the drug business as Farish, running errands, working in the lab. Hell, he had to drive him everywhere he went, and Farish paid him nothing like an equal share. In fact, didn't pay him shit. Just tossed him a 10 or a 20 from time to time. True, for a while, it had beat the hell out of having a regular job. Days squandered shooting pool or driving Farish around in the car, listening to music, staying up all night, fun and games. And all the drugs he could do, but watching the sun come up every morning was getting a little airy and repetitive, and lately it had got downright scary. He was tired of the life, tired of getting high, and was Farish about to pay Danny what he actually owed him so that he could leave town and go someplace where people didn't know him? You didn't stand much of a chance in this town if your last name was Ratliff, and get a decent job for a change. No, why should Farish pay Danny? He had a good deal going with his unpaid slave. Abruptly, Farish said, find that girl. That's your number one priority. I want you to find that girl, and I want you to find out what all she knows about this. I don't care if you have to wring her fucking neck. All right, bub. Thank you. She's already seen Colonial Williamsburg. She doesn't care if I see it or not, said Adelaide, and turned pettishly to look out the back window. Edie took a deep breath through her nostrils because of taking Harriet to camp. She was already good and driving because of Libby, who had to go back twice to make sure she turned off everything, and Adelaide, who'd made them wait in the car while she finished ironing the dress she decided to bring at the last minute, and Tat, who allowed them to get halfway out of town before she realized she left her wristwatch on the sink. Because of disorganization sufficient to drive the devil out of a saint, they were already 2 hours late in getting on the road. And now, before they were even out of town, Adelaide was demanding detours to another state. "Oh, we won't miss Virginia. We'll be seeing so much," said Tat, rouged, fresh, redolent of lavender soap and Aquanet and Sauvignon, whatever that is, toilet water. She was hunting through her yellow pocketbook for her asthma inhaler, though it does seem a shame since we will be all the way up there. "Yeah, Bubba, you're back." Adelaide began to fan herself with a copy of Mississippi Byways magazine that she brought to look at it in the car. "If you're not getting enough air back there," said Edie, "why don't you let your windows down a little? I don't want to muss my hair up. I just had it fixed." "Well," said Tat, leaning across, "if you crack it just a little." "No, stop. That's the door." "No, Adelaide, that's the door. This is the window. Please don't bother. I'm fine like this," Edie said. "If I was you, I wouldn't worry too much about my hair, Addie. You're going to get mighty hot back there." "Well, with all these other windows down," Adelaide said stiffly, "I'm getting blown to pieces as it is." Tat laughed. "Well, I'm not closing my window." "Well," said Adelaide primly, "I'm not opening mine." Libby, in the front seat next to Edie, made a drowsy, fretful noise, as if she couldn't get quite comfortable. Her powdery little cologne was inoffensive, but in combination with the heat and the powerful Asian clouds of Shalimar and Sauvignon simmering in the rear, Edie's sinuses had already begun to close up. Suddenly, Tat shrieked, "Where's my pocketbook?" What? Said everybody at once. "I can't find my pocketbook." Edith turned around, said Libby. "She's left her pocketbook." "I didn't leave it. I just had it." He said, "Well, I can't turn around in the middle of the street. Where can it be? I just had it. Oh, Tatty," merry laughter from Adelaide. "There it is. You're sitting on it." "What did she say? Did she find it?" Libby asked, looking around in a panic. "Did you find your pocketbook, Tat?" "Yes, I've got it now." "Oh, thank goodness. You don't want to lose your pocketbook. What if you lost your pocketbook?" As if announcing something over the radio, Adelaide proclaimed, "This reminds me of that crazy 4th of July weekend when we drove down to Natchez. I'll never forget it." "No, I won't forget it either," said Edie. That had been back in the 50s before Adelaide quit smoking. Adelaide, busy talking, had caught the ashtray on fire while Edie was driving down the highway. Goodness, what a long, hot drive. Edie said tartly, "Yes, my hand certainly felt hot." A red-hot drip of molten plastic cellophane from Addie's cigarette pack had stuck to the back of Edie's hand while she was slapping the flames out and trying to drive the car at the same time. Addie had done nothing but squeal and flap about in the passenger seat. It was a nasty burn that left a scar, and the pain and shock of it had nearly run Edie off the road. She had driven 200 miles in August heat with her right hand jammed in a paper cup full of ice water and tears streaming down her face, listening to Adelaide fuss and complain every mile of the way. "And what about the August we all drove to New Orleans?" Adelaide said, fluttering a hand comically over her chest. "I thought I was going to die of the heat stroke. Edith, I thought that you were going to look over here in the passenger seat and see that I had died." "You," thought Edie, "with your window shut. Who's ass?" said Tat. "What a trip." And that was. "You weren't with us." "Yes, I was. Indeed, she was. I'll never forget it," Adelaide said imperiously. "Don't you remember, Edith? That was the trip. You went to the drive-through McDonald's in Jackson and tried to tell our order to a garbage can in the parking lot." Peals of merry laughter. Edie gritted her teeth and concentrated on the road. "Oh, what a bunch of crazy old ladies we are," said Tat. "What those people must have thought." "I just hope I remembered everything," Libby murmured. "Last night I started thinking that I'd left my stockings at home and that I'd lost all my money." "I'll bet you didn't a wink of sleep, did you, darling?" said Tat, leaning forward to put a hand on Libby's thin little shoulder. "Nonsense. I'm doing beautifully. You know she didn't. Worrying all the night long. What you need," said Adelaide, "is some breakfast." "You know," said Taddy and clapped her hands, "that's a marvelous idea. Let's stop, Edith. Listen, I wanted to leave at 6 this morning. If we stop now, it'll be noon before we get on the road. Didn't you all eat before you left? Well, I didn't know how my stomach would feel until we'd been on the road a while, said Adelaide. We're hardly out of town. Don't worry about me, darling, said Libby. I'm too excited to eat a bite. Here, Tat, said Edie, fumbling with the thermos. Why don't you pour her a little cup of coffee? If she hasn't slept, said Tat primly, coffee may give her palpitations. Edie snorted. What's the matter with you all? You used to drink coffee at my house without complaining about palpitations or anything else. Now you act like it's poison. Makes you all wild. Very suddenly, Adelaide said, oh dear, turn around, Edith. Tat put her hand over her mouth and laughed. We're all to pieces this morning, aren't we? Edith said. What is it now? I'm sorry, Adelaide said tightly. I have to go back. What have you forgotten? Adelaide stared straight ahead, the Sanka. Well, you just have to buy some more. Well, Tat murmured. If she has a jar at home, it's a shame for her to buy another one. Besides, said Libby, hands to her face, eyes rolling with wholly feigned alarm. What if she can't find it? What if they don't sell it up there? You can buy Sanka anywhere. Edith, please, Adelaide snapped. I don't want to hear it. If you don't want to take me back, stop the car and let me get out. Very sharply, without signaling, Edie swung into the driveway of the highway branch bank and turned around in the parking lot. Aren't we something? I thought it was just me forgetting things this morning, Tat said gaily as she slid into Adelaide, bracing herself with a hand on Addie's arm for Edie's rough turn. And she was about to announce to everyone that she didn't feel quite so bad now about leaving her wristwatch at home when from the front seat there was a breathless cry from Libby and bam! The Oldsmobile struck hard in the passenger side, spun nose around so that the next thing anyone knew, the horn was blaring and blood was gushing from Edie's nose, and they were on the wrong side of the highway, staring through a web of cracked glass at oncoming traffic. Oh, Harriet, laughter, dismay, the ventriloquist's denim-clad dummy had singled her out of the audience. She and 50 other girls of varying ages were seated on long benches in a clearing in the woods the counselors called chapel. Up front, 2 girls from Harriet's cabin, Dawn and Jada, turned to stare at her. They'd been fighting with Harriet only that morning, a fight which had been interrupted by the chapel bell. Hey, take it easy, Ziggy, old boy, chuckled the ventriloquist. He was a counselor from the boys' camp named Zach. Dr. and Mrs. Zach and Mr. Vance had mentioned more than once that Zig, the dummy, and Zach had shared a bedroom. For 12 years, that the dummy had accompanied Zach to Bob Jones University as Zach's roommate. Harriet had already heard much more about it than she cared to. The dummy was dressed like a dead-end kid in knee pants and pork pie hat, and it had a scary red mouth and freckles that looked like measles. Now, in imitation of Harriet, presumably it popped its eyes and swiveled its head full circle. Hey, boss, and they call me a dummy, it shrieked aggressively. More laughter, particularly loud from Jada and Dawn, up front clapping their hands in appreciation. Harriet, face burning, stared haughtily at the sweaty back of the girl in front of her, an older girl with rolls of fat bulging around her bra straps. I hope I never look like that, she thought. I'll starve myself first. She had been at camp for 10 days. It seemed like forever. Edie, she suspected, had a little word with Dr. Vance and his wife because the counselors had established an irritating pattern of singling her out. But part of the problem, Harriet knew it lucidly without being able to do anything about it, was her inability to fit in with the group without attracting attention to herself. As a matter of principle, she had neglected to sign and return the covenant card in her information pack. This was a series of solemn pledges all campers were pressured to make. Pledges not to attend R-rated movies or listen to hard or acid rock music, not to drink alcohol, have sex before marriage, smoke marijuana or tobacco, or take the Lord's name in vain. It wasn't as if Harriet actually wanted to do any of these things, except sometimes, not very often, go to the movies. But still, she was determined not to sign it. Hey, hon, didn't you forget something? Said Nursey Vance brightly, putting an arm around Harriet, who stiffened immediately, and giving her a chummy little squeeze. No, I didn't get a covenant card from you. Harriet said nothing. Nursey gave her another intrusive little hug. You know, hon, God don't give us but 2 choices. Either something's right or it's wrong. Either you're a champion for Christ or you're not. From her pocket, she produced a blank covenant card. I want you to pray over this, Harriet, and do what the Lord guides you to do. Harriet stared at Nursey's puffy white tennis shoes. Nursey clasped Harriet's hand. Would you like me to pray with you, hon? She asked, confidentially, as if offering some great treat. No. Oh, I know the Lord will lead you to the right decision on this, said Nursey with a twinkly enthusiasm. Oh, I just know it. The girls in Harriet's wigwam had already paired up before Harriet arrived. Mostly, they ignored her, and though she woke one night to find her hand in a basin of warm water and the other girl standing around in the dark whispering and giggling at the bottom of her bunk, it was a trick the sleeper's hand in warm water thought to make the sleeper wet the bed. They didn't seem to have it in for Harriet particularly, though of course there had been Susan saran wrap too, stretched under the seat of the latrine. From outside, muffled laughter. Hey, what's taking you so long in there? A dozen girls doubled over laughing when she came out stony-faced with wet shorts. But surely that trick hadn't been directed specifically at her. Surely it had just been her bad luck. Clunky writing. Still, everybody else seemed to be in on the joke. Beth and Stephanie, Beverly and Michelle, Marcy and Darcy and Sarah Lynn, Crystal and Jada and Leanne and Devon and Dawn. They were mostly from Tupelo and Columbus. The girls from Alexandria, not that she liked them any better, were in Oriole and Goldfinch wigwams. They were all taller than Harriet and older looking, girls who wore flavored lip gloss and cut-off jeans and rubbed themselves with coconut oil on the water ski dock. Their conversation, the Bay City Rollers, the Osmonds, some boy named Jay Jackson, who went to their school, bored and irritated her. And Harriet had expected this. She had expected the covenant card. She had expected the bleakness of life without library books. She had expected the team sports, which she loathed, and the skit nights and the hectoring Bible classes. She had expected the discomfort and tedium of sitting in a canoe in the broiling, windless afternoons and listening to stupid conversations about whether Dave was a good Christian, whether Wayne had been to second base with Leanne, or whether Jay Jackson drank. And all this was bad enough, but Harriet was going to be in the 8th grade next year, and what she had not expected was the horrifying new indignity of being classed for the first time ever, a teen girl, a creature without mind, wholly protuberance and excretion, to judge from the literature she was given. She had not expected the chipper, humiliating film strips filled with demeaning medical information. She had not expected mandatory rap sessions where the girls were not only urged to ask personal questions, some of them, to Harriet's mind, frankly pornographic, but to answer them as well. During these discussions, Harriet burned radiant with hatred and shame. She felt degraded by Nursey's blithe assumption that she, Harriet, was no different from these stupid Tupelo girls. Preoccupied with underarm odor, the reproductive system and dating, the haze of deodorant and hygiene sprays in the changing rooms, the stubbly leg hair, the greasy lip gloss, everything was tainted with the slick oil of puberty, of obscenity, right down to the sweat on the hot dogs. Worse, Harriet felt as though one of the gruesome transparencies of your developing body, all womb and tubes and mammaries, had been projected over her poor dumb body, as if all anybody saw when they looked at her, even with their clothes on, were organs and genitalia and hair in unseemly places. Knowing that it was inevitable, just a natural part of growing up, was no better than knowing that someday she would die. Death, at least, was dignified, an end to dishonor and sorrow. True, some of the girls in her cabin, Crystal and Marcy in particular, had good senses of humor, but the more womanly of her cabin mates, Leanne, Darcy, Jada, Dawn, were coarse and frightening, and Harriet was revolted by their eagerness to be, and I lost my spot. Eagerness to be identified in crude biological terms, like who had tits and who didn't. They talked about necking and being on the rag. They used poor English, and they had absolutely filthy minds. Here, Harriet had said, when Leanne was trying to fix her life jacket, you sort of screw it in like this. All the girls, including the ingrate, Leanne, burst into laughter. Do what, Harriet? Screw, said Harriet chillingly. Screw is a perfectly good word. Oh, yeah? Idiotic snickers. They were filthy, all of them. The whole sweaty, menstruating boys crazed lot, with their pubic hair and their perspiration problems, winking and kicking each other in the ankles. Say it again, Harriet. What's it mean? What's she got to do? Zach and Zig had now turned to the subject of beer drinking. Now tell me this, Zig. Would you drink something if it tasted bad and was bad for you too? Phew, no way. Well, believe it or not, that's what a lot of grown people and kids, and even kids do. Kids. Zig, astonished, surveyed the audience. Kids here, boss? Maybe, because there are always a few dumb kids who think drinking beer is cool, man. Zach gave the peace sign, nervous laughter. Harriet, who had a headache from sitting in the sun, squinted on a cluster of mosquito bites on her arm. After this assembly, over in 10 minutes, thank heavens, there was 45 minutes of swimming, then a Bible quiz, then lunch. Swimming was the only activity Harriet liked or looked forward to. Alone with her with her heartbeat, she winnowed through the dark, dreamless lake, through the sickly, flickering shafts of non-light that penetrated the gloom. Near the surface, the water was as warm as bath water. When she swam deeper, spikes of cold spring water hit her in the face, and plumes of powdery murk rolled like green smoke from the plushy mire on the bottom, spiraling with every stroke, every kick. The girls only got to swim twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday, and she was especially glad that today was Thursday because she was still reeling from the unpleasant surprise she'd had at mail call that morning. A letter from Healy had arrived. When she opened it, she was shocked to see a newspaper clipping from the Alexandria Eagle, which read, "Exotic reptile attacks woman." There was a letter, too, on blue-lined school paper. "Oh, is that from your boyfriend?" Dawn snatched the letter away. "Hey, Harriet," she read aloud to everybody, "what's happening?" The clipping fluttered to the ground. With trembling hands, Harriet grabbed it up and crunched it in a ball and stuffed it in her pocket. "Thought you'd like to see this. Check it out." "Check what out? What's that?" Dawn was saying. Harriet, her hand in her pocket, was clawing the newspaper to shreds. "It's in her pocket," Jada was saying. She put something in her pocket. Get it, get it." Gleefully, Jada lunged at Harriet, and Harriet hit her in the face. Jada screamed, "Oh my God, she scratched me. You scratched me in the eyelid, you little shit." "Hey, you guys," someone hissed. "Mel's gonna hear." This was Melanie, their wigwam counselor. "I'm bleeding," Jada was shrieking. "She tried to put my eye out. Fuck." Dawn stood stunned, her frosty lip gloss mouth hanging open. Harriet took advantage of the confusion to snatch Healy's letter back from her hand to snatch the letter back from her and jam it in her pocket. "Look," said Jada, holding out her hand. On her fingertips and on her eyelid was blood. "Not a lot, but some. Look what she did to me." "You guys shut up," said someone shrilly, "or we're going to get a demerit." "If we get another one," said someone else in an aggrieved voice, "we can't roast marshmallows with the boys." "That's right, shut up." Jada, first drawn theatrically, stepped towards Harriet. "You better watch your back, girl," she said. "You better. Shut up, Mel's coming." Then the bell had rung for chapel, so Zach and his dummy had saved Harriet, for the moment at least. If Jada decided to tell, she'd get in trouble, but that was nothing new. Getting in trouble for fighting was something that Harriet was used to. What worried her was the clipping. It had been incredibly stupid of Healy to send it. At least no one had seen it. That was the main thing. Apart from the headline, she'd hardly seen it herself. She shredded it thoroughly, along with Healy's letter, and mashed the pieces together in her pocket. Something she realized had changed in the clearing. Zach had stopped talking, and all the girls had got very still and quiet all of a sudden. In the silence, a thrill of panic ran through Harriet. She expected the heads to turn all at once to look at her, but then Zach cleared his throat, and Harriet understood, as if waking from a dream, that the silence wasn't about her at all, that it was only the prayer. Quickly, she shut her eyes and bowed her head. As soon as the prayer was finished, and the girls stretched and giggled and began to gather in conversational groups, Jada and Dawn and Darcy too, obviously talking about Harriet, arms folded across her chest. Hostile stares across the clearing in her direction. Mel in tennis visor, swipe of zinc oxide down her nose, collared Harriet. Forget swimming, the Vances want to see you. Harriet tried to conceal her dismay. Up at the office, said Mel, and ran her tongue over her braces. She was looking over Harriet's head for the glorious Zach, no doubt worried that he might slip back to the boys' camp without talking to her. Harriet nodded and tried to look indifferent. What could they do to her? Make her sit by herself in the wigwam all day? Hey, Mel called after her. She'd already spotted Zach, had a hand up, and was threading through the girls towards him. If the Vances get finished with you before Bible study, just come on out to the tennis court and do drills with the 10 o'clock group, okay? The pines were dark, a welcome respite from the sun-bleached brightness of chapel, and the path through the woods was soft and sticky. Harriet walked with her head down. That was quick, she thought. Though Jada was a thug and a bully, Harriet hadn't figured her for a tattletale. But who knew? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Dr. Vance just wanted to drag her off for what he called a session, where he repeated a lot of Bible verses about obedience and then asked if Harriet accepted Jesus as her personal savior. Or maybe he wanted to question her about the Star Wars figure. 2 nights before, he had called the whole camp together, boys and girls, and screamed at them for an hour because one of them, he said, had stolen the Star Wars figure belonging to Brantley, his grunting little kindergarten-aged son. Or possibly she had a phone call. The phone was in Dr. Vance's office, but who would call her? Healy? Maybe it's the police, she thought uneasily. Maybe they found the wagon, and she tried to push the thought from her mind. She emerged from the woods warily. Outside the office, beside the minibus and Dr. Vance's station wagon, was a car with dealer's plates from Dial Chevrolet. Before Harriet had time to wonder what it had to do with her, the door to the office opened with a melodious cascade of wind chimes, and out stepped Dr. Vance, followed by Edie. Harriet was too shocked to move. Edie looked different, was subdued, and for a moment Harriet wondered if she was mistaken, but no. It was Edie, all right. She was just wearing an old pair of eyeglasses that Harriet wasn't used to, with mannish black frames that were too heavy for her face and made her look pale. Dr. Vance saw Harriet and waved with both arms as if he were waving from across a crowded stadium. Harriet was reluctant to approach. She had the idea that she might be in real trouble, deep trouble, but then Edie saw her too and smiled. And somehow the glasses, maybe, it was the old Edie, prehistoric, the Edie of the heart-shaped box, who had whistled and tossed baseballs to Robin under haunted Kodachrome skies. Hot and taut, she called. Dr. Vance stood by with composed benevolence as Harriet, bursting with love at the dear old pet name, seldom used, hurried to her across the graveled clearing as Edie bobbed down swift, soldierly, and pecked her on the cheek. Yes, ma'am. Mighty glad to see Grandma, boomed Dr. Vance, rolling his eyes up, rocking on his heels. He spoke with exorbitant warmth, but also as if he had his mind on other matters. Harriet, said Edie, are these all your things? And Harriet saw on the gravel by Edie's feet her suitcase and her knapsack and her tennis racket. After a slight disoriented pause during which her possessions on the ground did not register, Harriet said, you've got new glasses. Old glasses. The car is new. Edie nodded at the new automobile parked beside Dr. Vance's. If you've got something else back at the cabin, you'd better run along and get it. Where's your car? Never mind, hurry along. Harriet, not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, scurried away. She was perplexed by rescue from this unlikely quarter, more so because she had been prepared to throw herself on the ground at Edie's feet and beg and scream to be taken home. Apart from some art projects, she didn't want a grubby potholder, decoupage, well, you say that, decoupage, pencil box not yet dry. The only things Harriet had to pick up were her shower sandals and her towels. Someone had swiped one of her towels to go swimming with, so she grabbed the other and ran back to Dr. Vance's cabin. Dr. Vance was loading the trunk of the new car for Edie, who Harriet noticed for the first time was moving a little stiffly. Maybe it's Ida, thought Harriet suddenly. Maybe Ida decided not to quit. Or maybe she decided she had to see me one last time before she left. But Harriet knew that neither of those things was really the truth. Edie was eyeing her suspiciously. I thought you had 2 towels. No, ma'am. She noticed a trace of some dark caked matter at the base of Edie's nostrils. Snuff? Chester took snuff. Before she could climb in the car, Dr. Vance came around and, stepping sideways between Harriet and the passenger door, leaned down and gave Harriet his hand to shake. God has his own plan, Harriet. He said it to her as if telling her a secret. Does that mean we'll always like it? No. Does that mean we'll always understand it? No. Does that mean that we should wail and complain about it? No, indeed. Harriet, burning with embarrassment, stared into Dr. Vance's hard gray eyes. In Nursey's discussion group after your developing body, there had been lots of talk about God's plan, about how all the tubes and hormones and degrading excretions in the film strips were God's plan for girls. And why is that? Why does God try us? Why testeth he our resolve? Why must we reflect on these universal challenges? Dr. Vance's eyes searched her face. Why? What do they teach us on our Christian walk? Silence. Harriet was too revolted to draw her hand back. High in the pines, a blue jay shrieked. Part of our challenge, Harriet, is accepting that his plan is always for the best. And what does acceptance mean? We must bend to his will. We must bend to it joyously. This is the challenge that we face as Christians. All of a sudden, Harriet, her face only inches from his, felt very afraid. With great concentration, she stared at a tiny spot of reddish stubble in the cleft of his chin, where the razor had missed. Let us pray, said Dr. Vance suddenly, and squeezed her hand. Dear Jesus, he said, pressing thumb and forefinger into his tightly shut eyes. What a privilege it is to stand before you this day. What a blessing. What a blessing to pray with you. Let us be joyful in your presence. What's he talking about, thought Harriet, dazed. Her mosquito bites itched, but she didn't dare scratch them. Through half-closed eyes, she stared at her feet. Oh, Lord, please be with Harriet and her family in the days to come. Watch over them, keep guide, and shepherd them. Help them understand, Lord, said Dr. Vance, pronouncing all his consonants and syllables very distinctly, that these sorrows and trials are a part of their Christian walk. Where is Edie, thought Harriet, eyes shut. In the car? Dr. Vance's hand was sticky and unpleasant to the touch. How embarrassing if Marcy and the girls from the cabin came by and saw her standing in the parking lot holding hands with Dr. Vance of all people. Oh, Lord, help them not to turn their backs on you. Help them submit. Help them walk uncomplainingly. Help them not to disobey or be rebellious, but to accept your ways and keep your covenant. Submit to what, thought Harriet, with a nasty little shock. In the name of Christ Jesus, we ask it. Amen, said Dr. Vance, so loudly that Harriet started. She looked around. Edie was on the driver's side of the car with her hand on the hood, although whether she'd been standing there the whole time or not, or had eased over after the prayer moment, who could say? Nursey Vance had appeared from nowhere. She swooped down on Harriet with a smothering, bosom-me hug. The Lord loves you, she said in her twinkly voice. Just you remember that. She patted Harriet on the bottom and turned, beaming, to Edie as if expecting to start up a regular old conversation. Well, hey, but Edie wasn't in such a tolerant or sociable mood as she'd been when dropping Harriet off at camp. She gave Nursey a curt nod, and that was that. They got in the car. Edie, after peering over her glasses for a moment at the unfamiliar instrument panel, put the car in gear and drove away. The Vances came and stood out in the middle of the graveled clearing, and with their arms around each other's waists, they waved until Edie turned the corner. The new car had air conditioning, which made it much, much quieter. Harriet took it all in, the new radio, the power windows, and settled uneasily in her seat. In hermetically sealed chill, they purred along through the liquid leaf shade of the gravel road, glossing springily over potholes that had jolted the Oldsmobile to its frame. Not until they reached the very end of the dark road and turned onto the sunny highway did Harriet dare steal a look at her grandmother. But Edie's attention seemed elsewhere. On they rolled. The road was wide and empty, no cars, cloudless sky, margins of rusty red dust that converged to a pinpoint at the horizon. Suddenly, Edie cleared her throat. A loud, awkward ahem. Harriet, startled, glanced away from the window and at Edie, who said, "I'm sorry, little girl." For a moment, Harriet didn't breathe. Everything was frozen, the shadows, her heart, the red hands of the dashboard clock. "What's the matter?" she said. But Edie didn't look away from the road. Her face was like stone. The air conditioner was up too high. Harriet hugged her bare arms. Mother's dead, she thought, or Allison, or Dad, and in the same breath, she knew in her heart that she could handle any of those things. Aloud, she said, "What happened?" "It's Libby." Well, I guess Libby's dead. Now we know who the funeral's going to be for, or is this just another plot twist? Don't know, but I have baked potatoes waiting for me in the oven that are probably burnt at this point. All right, bye. Bye, bruv. Bye.